Okay, so right now, as I make this, on TV, there's a film called The Brave One, which stars Jodie Foster. Some of you may have seen it. It's a vigilante story. I was planning on doing another review of. I've got one of a few films to choose from to do next, but the fact that that The Brave One is on sort of prompted me in my choice a little bit, because only last week I got to watch a movie that I should have seen before but didn't get around to for a while, and I think it's The Brave One but done far better. I'm not keen on The Brave One at all. I don't think it's a very good film. I saw Death Sentence with Kevin Bacon. Now, it is a very, very similar sort of story, and in actual fact, you know, we've seen the story done before. If you've seen Death Wish, then you've seen Death Sentence. I think the fact that it's one's Death Wish, one's Death Sentence, I don't know if it's actually even a nod to that original movie. When the credits rolled, something that surprised me and that put me a bit on edge at first is the fact that it's James Wan. Go check out my review of Insidious to get my thoughts on that. His work, and I stand by this even with this review, particularly with this review actually, is he's a director to watch. He's far from perfect as a filmmaker, but he has a certain stamp about the way he tells a story that I do actually really enjoy. I didn't like the way Insidious fell apart, but Saw I really enjoyed, and I've said it before, I'm only going to be repeating myself, but you know, before it became a parody of itself, I really enjoyed that first film. Now Death Sentence I wasn't aware was done by him until those credits rolled, and as the last film I'd seen by him was Insidious, and I'd been sort of about it, you know, I wasn't, and with it being such a predictable story, I wasn't sure, but I went with it. And Kevin Bacon plays a guy called Nick Hume, who's an insurance guy, white-collar worker, who is a family man. And right from the off, you know, you know where it's going. And in that sense, there's no big surprise. I mean, with a film called Death Sentence, and you're setting up a family man, you don't get any prizes for knowing where that story's headed. And for a while, I wasn't sure, but the film kind of grabbed me in a way that I was sort of surprised, because we've seen this story, the vigilante story, done quite a lot, to varying levels of success. I've given it 7, I'll say now, I've given it 7 out of 10 on IMDb, which is good. I enjoyed it far more than I thought I was going to. The downsides of Death Sentence lie, I should say, mainly in the fact that up until a certain point in the film, it sort of struggles with what sort of movie it wants to be. Normally in this sort of story, you know, family man, something happens to a member of his family, the law can't do anything about it, you know, due to circumstance or whatever, and then, you know, man takes law into his own hands, and they explore the political point of that, or they explore the personal issues that raises. And a film like this normally knows what it's trying to do. Death Sentence kind of struggles with it a little bit. It kind of wants to be a political film, but it wants to be a thriller. It sort of wants to be a personal drama, a character study like Taxi Driver. It sort of, I even dare say that at a couple of points it sort of dipped its toe into black comedy, strangely, and yet that worked. Like I say, for a while it struggles to know what it wants to do, but what saves it, apart from the final act, which we're going to get to, what saves it in that first half where it's sort of flip-flopping a bit is clearly the central performance by Kevin Bacon. I mean, I'm not just saying it because I'm a fan. He is really, really good. In fact, the performances all round are quite good. And on a scene-to-scene basis, the other thing that saves it and that makes it really enjoyable is that, again, I reiterate, James Wan is actually very good at what he does. Although, yes, the film in its writing sort of isn't sure about itself, Wan does the absolute best that he can with it, and it got to a point in the movie where I was realising that I was enjoying the style of the film and the direction almost more than I was enjoying, the predictable, I've seen this before story. The film has a couple of surprises. The movie's fairly brave. It's braver than I was expecting. It goes, normally they want to push your buttons and see what your reaction, to ask you to react to the story and say, what do you think about this, push to this extreme. Well, this film does that to sort of quite a strong degree, more than I've seen another film do it. And I was surprised where the film went and actually had the courage of its, it actually stuck to that, and without spoiling it, it goes somewhere that I sort of went, wow. It genuinely, my jaw did actually drop at how far they were willing to push. But apart from those couple of and there's another little surprise later on, sort of, if you wouldn't call it a twist, but a little turn in the story that you sort of, you get a little bit stunned by. But in that first half, one of the things that really carries it is this very creative. He's a very creative director. There is an incredible scene, and it's my favourite scene in the movie. And all I'll say is it involves a car park. Very elaborate setup. Quite a unique idea, and this is at a point in the movie where it sort of wants to be an action film. And we come back again to that point that as a narrative it sort of struggles a bit with what it's trying to say and what it's trying to do. Unlike, say, The Brave One or Death Wish or Taxi Driver, it is, it does struggle. Now, that said, another surprise that I must say I've just thought of is, normally these films make the suggestion, like Harry Brown did, that technically there's nothing more that can be done within the law, and that the reason the person takes justice into the law into their own hands is because they feel unsatisfied with what's happening. In this film, that's done a bit differently, which was quite unique. I liked seeing a slightly fresh take on the idea of why he does what he does. Kevin Bacon is, like I said earlier, that once you fall into that final act, it does a bit of a Taxi Driver, and it definitely nods very heavily towards Taxi Driver. It pays its respects to that movie. Kevin Bacon is, I think he's an actor who, with a few exceptions sort of aside, he generally seems to take stuff that he seems to be in stuff that he finds interesting, rather than the attitude of just, hand me the paycheck and I'll do what you want me to do. You look at films like The Woodsman and this, Death Sentence, and like Sleepers, and there have been other things. There was off the top of my head I can't remember, but he did a thing for, I think it was HBO, about the war, and he's clearly he's a smart actor, and if he wanted to do the leading man thing more, he easily could, but he sort of doesn't, and he stays just on that fringe. People know him, but he does enough of the outside stuff, you know, to... Not entirely sure what I'm trying to say, but I think you get my point. John Goodman turns up in this film as the sleaziest arms dealer, delightfully insane, and actually ultimately has sort of a key part to play, and it relates to one of those surprises that I mentioned. And you know, big fan of John Goodman. It's really good to see him just getting into insane mode here, and he's quietly but frighteningly and delightfully insane. It's quite an odd performance. Then it falls into a final act where the film changes gear, and I was sort of on a knife edge about it, because on the one hand I really liked that the film found its groove and knew what it was trying to do. On the other hand, it wasn't really how I would have taken it. But that said, I'm not the one making the film, so I kind of went with it. And for what it does do, it does it really well. And unlike, say, Harry Brown, again, you can reference my old video, it doesn't try to sort of squeeze all the moral stuff into a little bit of dialogue at the end. There's this, it knows what it's doing, but it makes the point about the change in him quite nicely, and it's less crowbarred in than it is in, say, Harry Brown. So yeah, this is this is another one of those rambly reviews. I didn't write it beforehand, and I'm just sort of going with the flow. I am aware that I've not really given you much of a synopsis beyond the opening, but you know, with this sort of movie, you don't really need it. You know what's coming. It is Death Wish for now, but I think it's Death Wish done much better, and I think it's done a lot better than any of the recent vigilante type films. As much as the film struggles with itself a bit, the performances and James Wan's direction and how it does find its groove is definitely worth a watch. There are a lot of flaws with the film, but I found myself enthralled, particularly because of that scene I mentioned. It really kind of got me in. It really took my interest with how good a director he is. So perhaps a little bit style over substance, but still worth a watch. If you think that you're tired of that sort of story and you don't want to see any more, just give this film a chance. Make it your last one and give it a try, because you might be surprised, as I was. As I say, nowhere near perfect, but because of all the things I did like about it, I still gave it 7 out of 10. And if you can pick it up on rent or something, and you like a ballsy, because one of the, when it does find its groove, what I like is it manages to then, like I say, for the first half it doesn't really know what it's doing, but when it does eventually know what it's doing, it's almost like once he found the key, he was able to do both ideas at once. He was able to do a really balls out action vigilante film and sort of make the more personal and political points about violence and about the dangers of the change that that sort of action can bring about, and it does it quite nicely. It eventually finds a way of it. Like I say, it finds its groove and it works. And as I say, works better than some of the other films that I think have tried to do a similar thing. So that's that. Not one to buy, but if you like Kevin Bacon, if you like vigilante films, if you like that sort of, a film that's got a commentary to it, then check this out, because there are a lot of good things about it, enough to make it well worth your watch.